Hello, 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 and thank you for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. We are here to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. The tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And that's what we want to do today, get you fired up for this Monday. Today we will be speaking with Eddy Mann. He is a top 10 Christian music weekly artist and worship leader. So we are in for a treat. We're talking music today, folks. Well, let me tell you a little bit about Eddy. Eddy Mann is a musician, a songwriter, a worship leader, a teacher, a speaker, a coach, a husband, and a father. Whether you know him as one or more of these people, you will start to know his heart. And you know his heart is filled with a love for life. Through the past year, he has had some colorful times, some playful times, but it's also been constant in his vision. It's always been a vision of hope, of peace, of understanding through the eyes of a loving heart. Eddy leads worship, or has led worship for over 15 years as a musician and a songwriter. It was 20 years ago that he made the decision to offer his creative gifts to God. Since then, he's released 7 CDs and has written countless songs for the church and the world at large. On any weekend, you can find him in a coffee house or in a concert, at a conference, and or leading worship. His greatest earthly joys are his family, his wife Susan, his daughter Ashley and Maddie, his grandkids Joey, Layla, Lexi, and his sponsored children Emerita and Adjoint, and his beloved Molly that is no longer with us. She was a beagle. A new album is out, and it's called The Consequence. It's the follow-up to the 2014 Dig Love. It was released on Election Day, November 8th. It once touches on the themes of a peaceful and loving existence while delving into the consequences of our actions. Musically, it continues down the path of Dig Love, and its charting has stayed close to the Americana, roots rock, and kind of singer-songwriter traditions. The singles You Make Me Feel, and Something Beautiful and New from Dig Love and Regarding Prize, respectfully, have both enjoyed national airplay charting. The title track from The Consequence reached top 10 status, number 8 on the Christian Music Weekly Country Chart, earning Mann an Academia Award and Kendrick Music Award. His latest single is All I Need Is You. So, like I said, we are going to talk to a successful Christian music artist today. He's a worship leader, a father, a husband, a teacher, a speaker, and more. So Eddy's going to share some of the secrets for wearing so many hats and how his faith has helped him succeed in so many ways. So without any further ado, let's bring on Eddy. Hello, Eddy. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi. It's an honor to be with you today. A joy.
Thank you so much. Yes, so I wanted to I love music. I love all types of music. I grew up in a very musical home. We all know how to play an instrument. We all had kind of an input in being able to pick what we wanted to listen to because there was always music playing in our home. So many times, though, I found that where a person grows up and what they're exposed to as children can really help shape them musically. Have you found that growing up in a particular place or having been through certain things have helped shape not only your music, but how music affects your faith?
Absolutely. I was very fortunate to be brought up, number one, in a good, sound Christian home where I was in church each week. So old hymns are part of the fabric of who I am. My father was a jazz pianist, so I heard a lot of bebop jazz in the late 50s and early 60s from him. And my mother freely, even though she wasn't a singer per se, freely shared any number of folk songs that she was brought up with singing with me as a child. So there was always music in the house, and I think that because I listened to all different types of music, I tend to write in a lot of different genres. I don't really feel like that I'm ever in one particular box for too long. When I write, I kind of like the song to go where it needs to go as opposed to me directing it. I just kind of want to be along for the ride. I just kind of want to feel the flow of the song, and when it ends up, if it fits into this box, that's great, and if not, it fits over here. I was brought up in Philadelphia, so I've got a lot of R&B music from the sound of Philly through the years growing up. That's a part of who I am. And in fact, my first album, one of the first reviews said it referred to it as blue-eyed gospel, which I got a kick out of. I thought that's pretty creative. So yeah, absolutely. I think our environments in general shape us enormously, and in this case in particular, yeah, I never find myself wanting for a style of music, and I'm one of those guys that I write every day. I have a period of meditation in the morning for myself, and I usually follow that with an hour. I allow myself an hour to just be with God with an instrument, and sometimes I may just worship Him for that hour. Sometimes I may write. Sometimes I may work on something that's coming, a musical figure or something that I'm having difficult playing. But I've got that built-in time each day, and it allows me to try to continue to hone the gift of music in a worship sense.
Yeah, and I love that you say that. You do separate that time, and sometimes it's just a time of worship. And many times I think folks forget that we do need to spend that personal time in praise and worship and just being thankful for the yesterdays, for today's, and for the things that we know are going to happen in the future, because we just know that God's going to be so awesome and continue to move in our lives. I love that you say that.
Yeah, I share with my gatherings all the time that I don't do anything different when I'm out performing or leading worship or all I'm doing is what I do every day. I'm just sharing it with other people.
Right.
It's not really something that I don't, I'm never in an uncomfortable place, because it's just part of who I am to want to worship through music or through prayer or through word or just being with nature. I get the opportunity twice a year to, again, still living up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I have the opportunity twice a year to travel south down the East Coast, and we make various stops along the way, and then we usually spend at least 4 weeks worshiping and doing our ministry in the state of Florida. And I'm blessed to have a beautiful little place in Melbourne Beach, Florida, and some mornings, who am I kidding? Every morning that the weather will allow, I'm on the beach. And this past year, I was really just working more. It was more in a meditative sense. And rather than getting to the beach and immediately going into prayer, I would go to the beach and I might spend an hour, up to an hour, just walking and being with nature before I got into prayer with God. Just allowing myself to just run amok, so to speak, with God's creation. So I have a thing where I walk toward the water far enough that my peripheral vision sees nothing but ocean, and then I feel like I see creation just the way God made it. As long as there's no planes or boats out there, or ships, it's just me in creation, just the way God made it. And I love that time. I love that space.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful picture that you paint. I am a beach baby, or at least that's what I call myself. I love being on the water. I think that fellow beach babies automatically understand, not that I'm knocking anyone that loves the mountains or the deserts, because it's all God's creation, and we need what we need. But for me, I totally understand that there is just something about the tranquility of being at the water, and it just speaks to my spirit a certain way, and it's so tranquil and calming, and can really open your mind and free you from all of the clutter, the noise, and just the stuff that we've built up from being in the city. And in the city is even if you live in the suburbs. There's still stuff that's going on, and it's just so peaceful there.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of God's creation. No matter how you're wired, if you're somebody that wants to be in the great outdoors and be sleeping on the ground, and I mean, God's created places like that for you to get away, to get closer to Him. And if you're like you and I, where you just want to sit at the water's edge and be with God, He's created that for us also. So there's a beauty, an unbelievable, for me, just an unending beauty in diversity that God has created. And it kind of freaks me out that we live in a world that can't embrace that. In fact, it's almost as if we don't want diversity. The world at large seems to want everybody to think the way they think, like what they like, say what they say, and believe what they believe. And that's not what God created. God created this beautiful, diverse world with different types of trees and different types of mountains, and just different landscapes, different temperatures for those that like the cold, and I like it hot. But it's as a society and as a world, we've lost the ability to embrace that diversity. Sad.
It really is. I was on Instagram the other day, and I love a beautiful sunrise and a beautiful sunset. And I posted this beautiful picture that I happen to have taken, of course, at the beach, and I just labeled it or tagged it or titled it, however you say that, and just said, look at the artistry that we're given every day. God paints with such beautiful colors. And if you are a morning person, which I kind of am, just because I'm mom, so I get the kids up and all of that. But we get these two very beautiful, unique masterpieces every single day that kind of just reminds us in a very subtle, beautiful way of just the majesty of who our Creator is. And it speaks to each person differently. And I love how we can interpret that however we want to. And if we can see it from wherever our best spot is, it really and truly does create for a beautiful beginning or end to just the craziness of the day.
Yeah, that's a great. I'll tell you a story. You and I. Well, first of all, you and I can hang together, man. You and I like the same stuff. Right. I was down in Florida. All right, my wife and I are down in Florida, and this was one of our trips. We were on the East Coast, and I had the opportunity to lead worship in Venice, Florida, which is on the Gulf side. We had never been there before, and it was February, and it was cold for Florida for February. I know that sounds silly, and it sounds, I don't mean it to sound any way except the fact that it was uncomfortable for what people were used to. So it was a lot of rain, a lot of clouds, which this particular day that we took off to go to drive to the opposite coast, it was beautiful. The sky was clear, the sun was out, it was warm, and we got into Venice, Florida, mid-afternoon, getting to late afternoon, and we settled into our accommodations, which was a beautiful beachfront, or a rather Gulf front a hotel, and we went out to grab something to eat, and amazingly I found a cafe that made really great Philly cheesesteaks. And we started to feel like, well, this is going to be a special trip. We got back to our hotel and saw this beautiful, beautiful sunset over the Gulf. And later that night when we got home, we saw this unbelievably beautiful full moon set over the Gulf. And we were just amazed at the blessing of the day from what we had the previous 10 days or so, and the beauty in it. And just the blessing of being able to experience it in the way that we did. And we got up the next morning, and the first thing that my wife and I, we started talking about at breakfast, well, maybe, I wonder if we should stay. Excuse me. I wonder if we should stay another day. And I thought, I don't know. I said, we could have, no place we have to be on Monday. Maybe we should think about it. And we didn't really resolve it. And we got into church, and I was halfway through the service, and I was playing a song, and I forget what song it was, but it was a paraphrase of I believe it's Psalm 103. And I stopped the intro of the song, and I announced to my wife, we're going home after this. And the whole congregation was kind of quiet, trying to figure out whatever possessed him to say that in the middle of the service. But during this particular interlude of the song, I was thinking about it's better just to spend, how the Psalms tell us that it's better to spend one day in God's courts than 1,000 elsewhere. And it hit me how ungrateful my wife and I were. That this 24-hour period was just unbelievably blessed. And wasn't it so human-like to say, I want more. I want to stay another day. And all of a sudden I felt this guilt welling up inside of me, and I just announced it to my wife, and I explained it then after to the congregation. And once a year now I visit that congregation, and I never spend a Sunday there where that doesn't come up in conversation, that it touched other people. It wasn't planned, but I just caught myself, my broken self, in public, in front of everybody on a Sunday morning, just say, no, this is wrong. Take this beautiful blessing and live in this moment, and then take it with you instead of wanting more,
Yeah. And it's so funny how we do have a tendency to do that, and we don't understand that sometimes our moment of now is just that, a moment of now. Well, listeners, don't you go anywhere. We need to take a very short break, but when we come back, we are going to continue talking to Top 10 Christian Music Weekly artist, Eddy Mann. We'll be back right after this. Hello, and thank you. We are back. Welcome to Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. Today, we are talking with Top 10 Christian Music Weekly artist and worship leader, Eddy Mann. We're talking about the different ways in which music can affect us and how you wear so many hats, but still staying true to who you are. Which leads to my next question for you, Eddy. You are a worship leader and a Christian music artist, a father, a husband, a teacher. You are so many things. You wear so many hats. Which role do you find to be the most important, or the one that really kind of speaks to your heart the most, and why would you say that is?
I think that somewhere along the line I've adopted the idea that whatever I'm doing at the moment is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And that I never want to discount anything I'm doing. I could be talking one-on-one with somebody and be thinking about a performance later where I'm going to have 200 people there. Well, that conversation might end up being enormously consequential to this person's life. And I don't want to discount that because it's one person as opposed to 200. I think on paper you look at it and you think, well, worship leader should be the most important thing. That's the biggest honor. But I think that's just, again, that's a human flaw that we have, that we think that the normal stuff that we do from the time we get up to the time we go to bed at night isn't as important, when it may be even more important, because we're actually dealing with people who maybe aren't believers during the day when we're at the market, or when we're in our workplace, or when we're driving down the street, when we're shopping at the mall. Those are the times when we get to be more like Jesus than on Sunday morning, when I always look at it like I'm playing on Sunday morning with a net, because everybody there's probably a believer, as opposed to being out at the mall where the percentage can change drastically. So whatever I do at any given time this is the most important thing in my life right now, my time with you and your listeners. When I'm done here, I'll be moving to the studio, and I'll be spending a good portion of the evening recording a new album. And, again, that'll be the most important thing till I wake up tomorrow. And that's how I get from the beginning to the end of my day, because on any given day I might wear 5 or 6 of those hats.
Right. But no, I love that. I love that perspective, because like you said, the moment that you're with that particular person, that could be a life-changing moment for that person. And how dare we discount that for another moment that hasn't even happened yet? Just be in that moment and give your 100% to that person or that group or whatever event is going on at that moment, and people will see your best in that moment. I love that. Love that.
I think it's natural because of the pace of the world that we live in, that the flesh wants to look and plan ahead all the time. And we need to have goals to shoot for and work for. And we need to be organized to be a good servant with the gifts that we have. But I think that in general, that when we start worrying about the pace is when we forget to live in the moment and maybe worship in the moment, or to speak God's word in the moment.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to my next question. And you said, to be able to worship in the moment and just understand that our lives move at a certain pace. God's plan for us moves at a certain pace. And I want to talk about the consequence. Tell us about your latest album and how did that come about, and the consequence. You have to tell us about the title. How did you come up with that title?
Well, because I write every day, I don't usually write or deliver, I guess, concept albums. I write, and whatever I write every day reflects what I'm living through. And the time I wrote the songs for the consequence while I was out supporting Big Love. And Big Love was a departure of sorts because it was the first album probably in 8 years that wasn't a worship album. It was filled with songs about living in the kingdom, and they were conversation starters for me when I would go out and play them. And I wanted to get out and play some more secular places and try to reach those that didn't have believing hearts. And that album enabled me to do that. But while I was out doing that, and I was writing, I found myself writing some songs that were sometimes a little bit darker, because even if you subscribe to the idea of an idyllically peaceful world and a compassionate lifestyle, you still have darkness in your life. We still experience loss, whether it's of health or loved ones. Life just isn't perfect. It never is.
Right.
You never have that perfect day. There's always some kind of pressure on you or some kind of darkness to deal with. And for me, it's always been the power of love is what gets me through any kind of darkness. That automatically shines light for me. So in writing the songs for this album, I came across I wrote a song called The Consequence. And I was really reflecting, when I wrote that, I was reflecting on the people in my life that unknowingly did or said things that had an enormous consequence as to who I became. Like my parents, for instance, my parents taking me to church every week. I certainly didn't know what I believed when I was a young man like that in school, but those seeds were being planted. And later on in my life, when the next gig or the next woman or the next drug or the next drink wasn't going to be enough and I wanted purpose, those seeds had taken root, and I knew that there was something there for me. I always kid people. I grew up in a Lutheran church, and as a young man, up until 8, 9 years old, I didn't know that the pastors had first names. They just seemed big old German guys that seemed closer to God. They didn't even seem real. It's like they went up to heaven at night. They didn't actually live in a house. And then all of a sudden, while I was in high school, we had a new pastor, and he introduced himself, and he said, "Hi, my name's Charlie." And I thought, okay, it's cool. He's got 2 first names. And he said, no, my name's Charlie. And I thought, wow, how cool is that? And then I found out he was a bit of a musician. And he took to the idea that I was a budding musician and had a heart for Jesus, and got me involved within the service. Well, the fourth week of each each month he announced one Sunday morning was going to be a youth Sunday, and the youth were going to run the service, and they were going to keep their liturgy, but we were going to rewrite the music, and we were going to have some ownership. It was a wonderful idea, and it's, again, had a consequence as to who I am. It made it possible for me to do what I do today. When I was a senior in high school, my band took off during the spring break, and we decided to drive to Fort Lauderdale to pick up college babes. Now, this is what high school guys think and do. Of course, we didn't pick up anything while we were there. Some sand, maybe. But along the beach in Fort Lauderdale, every 2 or 3 blocks at night there would be a flatbed truck with a generator, and different types of bands would play. And you could rock out to some kind of country, southern country rock thing, and your next night you could get down further and hear some English rock thing, and you could go down and have an R&B band thing. It was different. And every night, no matter where I started, I ended up in front of a band called Hope, which was a Christian band. Now, I know absolutely, positively that not one guy in that band has any idea the consequence that had in my life, and that I still remember that band, and I can still picture myself on the beach watching them. And I got their album, and I could not wait to get home and share it with Charlie. And I got home, jumped in my little Volkswagen Beetle, and I drove over his house, and I got to the door, and he was so excited because he had a brand new album for me to play. And I gave him this album, Hope, by this Christian band, and he gave me England's Led Zeppelin 1, which was just completely, but he made ministry real.
Yeah.
He made it that a real person could do ministry, a real flawed person, a real broken person could still do ministry. And that's really what the song was about. And when I started to look at the other songs on the album, I thought, geez, this would be a great title to kind of put a ribbon around all these songs. And being who I am, I keep an accountability team. I played it for some people that know me well enough and love me enough to tell me when something's not good. And even when I wasn't sure of the song, they thought, no, it's a powerful song. You should include it on the album. And when I told them, when it ended up, they all thought it was great that we were going to call it The Consequence. And it just so happened that at the time I had one or two, I guess I had 2, maybe 3. I guess it was 3 now that I think of it. I had 3 worship albums that sold out during a 6-week period. Just worked out that way. And this was in September of 2016. So I didn't release The Consequence. I ended up releasing a compilation album with the most engaging songs from those worship albums. And I pushed The Consequence back to November, and then when I saw Election Day, I thought, oh, no, this is perfect. And I used it not for any political sense as much as a way to stimulate people to go out and vote and be a part of the process. Sway the consequence not only of the conversations you're in all day and all the people that you meet all day and how you deal with darkness and troubled times, but, this is a gift that we have, is to live in this country and to be able to vote regardless of all the politicians and regardless of all the politicking that goes on. It's still a privilege and a right that I wanted to just have a statement concerning the apathy toward it.
Of course. And I think that we forget so many times that the things that we do, there are other countries that are still fighting for the right to do a particular thing or to do it safely. And we forget that voting, people have died trying to vote here and in other countries. And
Amen.
if we just keep that in our memory, sometimes we tend to forget the things that have happened in the past because they're so in the past. But we really do live in a time where we're so privileged to be able to do many of the things that we're doing, including this, and being able to speak openly about our faith and who we are, and be able to commune with other believers and just be comfortable and not have to worry about what's going to happen to us either now or in the future. But you know what, listeners? I know our time passed so quickly. Eddy is just so inviting, and I just love the laid-back vibe that we have right now. But we need to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. We will be back with Top 10 Christian Music Weekly artist and worship leader Eddy Mann. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. Today we are talking with Eddy Mann, and he is a top 10 Christian Music Weekly artist and a worship leader. So we're going to pick his brain a little bit. We've been talking about being an artist and what that means and how to share your faith from that particular perspective. But I want to kind of shift a little bit and talk about being a worship leader. When did you first feel the call to be a worship leader?
That's a great question. I didn't. I got a giant stack of Moses cards that I throw out when people say, "Do you want to do this?" Oh, I'm not equipped for that. I don't think I could do that. I never went to school for that. I'm not big enough for that. I'm not loud enough for that. I'm not talking. I had started my journey toward God, toward giving my gift to Him, and I had put together a trio, a small band that was out doing concerts in coffee houses, and we had released, I think, 2 albums. And a pastor that I had never met from a church that I had never attended, through God's grace only, came about one of the albums. Listened to it. The Spirit was on his heart to contact me. Called me in, said, "Do you have 15 minutes?" I said, "Sure." So we made an appointment. I went with him. I spent 3 hours talking with him and walked out the door, and I was a worship leader.
Wow.
Neither of us knew exactly how to define it at that point, but this was going to be a Saturday night service, and it was basically trying to create a service that would reach people that were unchurched at that moment. And it grew, it blossomed very quickly from 30 to 60 to 90, and we had to move it to a downstairs, a much larger facility. It still was not in the sanctuary. And it was reaching a lot of people that were disenfranchised from the church that maybe were not comfortable because of something that's happened in the past to be in the sanctuary, but still were comfortable to worship God and hear His word. But it outgrew that within a month. So what we did was we started a Sunday service and kept the Saturday service. And during that time of maybe a 3-year period, that Sunday service grew to be about 300 strong on a weekly basis, and we still had maybe 50 or 60 on the Saturday night service. Now, when I first started the Sunday service, I had an image and a sound in my mind of what the band and the music would sound like. And, of course, there was no band. It was me, a cocktail pianist, and the pastor's wife who sang. And that's what it was in the beginning. And it took a couple years maybe. By the second year, I had a full-fledged band, and within 2 years later, I had 15, 16 people as part of my team. I had a group of singers and had a wonderful reed player and multiple musicians at different things. What I had to learn, the hardest part, the learning curve for me was not about leading a band. I had done that professionally for most of my life, and that was not even work. I had been a teacher and taught for 10 years, so teaching was a natural thing for me to do, but I was not a spiritual leader. And therein lied, was the space that I needed to grow into. And those first couple years I made mistakes. And, you know, I have spoken to anyone and everyone that I made mistakes with over that time. But I learned, and still am, hopefully, learning how to be a better spiritual leader for people. I realized a couple years in that when that when we could lead worship, and it sounded like everybody in that band got paid, I was doing a pretty good job. Because unlike in years past, if you didn't know your parts and you didn't learn it, you didn't practice before rehearsal, then I would replace you with someone. You were getting paid to do a job. You weren't doing it, then there was always someone else that would step in and do it. But this was completely different. These are people that had lifestyles outside of the church, had responsibilities outside of the church, and through the goodness of their heart and the gifts that God had given them, wanted to participate in the honor of leading other people in worship. And there, and just explaining to them what an honor it was to be on the platform, to be chosen to lead God's people in worship, was part of the process of learning how to be a spiritual leader. So it was never a difficult thing to do, as much as there was an awakening at some point for me that okay, we're not dealing with this on a spiritual level. I remember going to a conference in Austin, Texas, and I walked into a large church there, and there were 2,000 worship leaders in there, and when they sang, I had never heard or experienced anything like that in my life. And the week I spent at that conference broke me down. It broke me down to all the faults in my approach to being a worship leader. And 2 years later, I was at a retreat in Kansas, and at that retreat, it was just maybe 15 to 20 of us, and some major heavyweight songwriters in the Christian world were there to participate and stay at the retreat with us. And there was a time there when I was completely broken, that I realized how unworthy I had been, and how yet God still loved me enough to choose me to lead His people in worship, to choose the songs to put the words in their mouths that they're going to sing to God. And I was just overwhelmed with it. I'd spent probably 2 or 3 days just so broken that every time my wife wanted to talk to me, I just cried. I was just completely broken. So I'm always honored and humbled every single time that God chooses to use me in front of people, even if we have a home church on Wednesday night, and I never lose sight of that. And normally there's at least 3 or 4 times a week where I'm in front of God's people in some kind of setting, singing and worshiping with them. And 2 years ago, I resigned from the position I had held for 15 years, thinking that it was time, with big love and the consequence, to be out in the marketplace. And as of this afternoon, I'm on the cusp of taking a new position at a new church to lead worship on a regular basis there, as only God would have it. My wife and I were just looking for a community church for us, since when we're not on the road and when we're home, and we've been trying to settle in, and we found a church we really loved, and wouldn't you know, the second week they told me that they were looking for a worship leader. So it looks like when I thought that season was over, but God has more plans for me, which is just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
That's right. We just never know what is in the master plan for our lives sometimes, and we just have to be willing to go when we're told to go, move when we're told to move, and just remember that it's not about what we want to do. It's about what God has purposed us to do, and we have to really be open to receive that. That's amazing. That's so wonderful.
I've tried to. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask you, where can our listeners find you online? I know that that you do some local stuff and you travel and you're all over the place. So, but where can they find you? Are there any particular places that you want them to go more so than any other? Like, I'm a Twitter person. You can find me on Twitter probably more than you can find me on Facebook, though I have a Facebook presence. Do you have a particular social media location that you want folks to really follow you?
Yeah, I have a couple. I really, really, really encourage people to be in conversation with me about anything. there's no greater blessing than to be able to pray for someone else when they're going through times where they feel like they need it. My website, eddymann.com, EDDYMANN, is the all. That's the hub of information. There's more information than you even want to know about me there. On Facebook, I have a presence both as a profile and a music page. The music page is eddymann.musician. And on Twitter and Instagram, I can be reached at Eddy_Mann, EDDY_MANN. We just live in a world where it's so easy to communicate with people that I don't feel like we fully take advantage of it. We meet people once and say, yeah, we'll stay in touch, and then we never talk to them again. When Twitter's gotten to the point, we sometimes use the least amount of letters to have a conversation, but still it's so easy to reach out to people and to share. And I always feel like, I'm here with you today and I'm here with your listeners today for a greater reason than the past 45 minutes or hour. There's a connection. There's a thread now that it's up to us to nurture that and allow it to be more than just this one-time type of thing. So I encourage people, again, to be in contact, to be in conversation. If you hear a piece of music and it just touches a nerve and you hate it, let's talk about it, because that's what being human's about. We were made to be in fellowship with each other, and certainly not made to agree on everything. It's okay. So.
Right. And I love how you say that you love to have the conversation. Even if you disagree about a particular point, it's just having that conversation. And it seems that people that are artists, be it that it's music or it is paint or it's sculpture, that there's an understanding that you may not see it the same way, but you see it. So what do you see? What do you feel? What do you hear? And let me see if I can understand where you're coming from as much as I'm trying to explain to you where I'm coming from. That conversation and that understanding is just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, there's something. If you're for people that are are a little more quiet about it, you can. I have an email line at prayer@eddymann.com that is just kind of, you don't want to say who you are or whatever, that's fine too. There's just a lot of ways for us to interact more in community, and I'm always trying to nurture that, encourage it.
Well, definitely. Well, Eddy Mann, thank you so much for visiting with me here today. I loved spending some time with you and just understanding what it's like to have a musician who plays for the Lord, but also just is so willing to share purpose and understanding of the moments of now, and trying to make sure that we really and truly understand what it means to be utilized and to be a vessel when we are working in our craft. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Well, thank you. It's been a joy, and I've really enjoyed it, and look forward to hanging with you again sometime at the beach, maybe.
That's right. Hey, you never know. You never know where we are going to be. That's right. Because when you're on tour, you never know. That's right. You just never know.
You need to do a remote from the beach.
Oh my goodness. Listen, that just might work out. You never know. So, all right, listeners, you heard it here. So if you end up saying something that's like, I'm at the beach, you know that Eddy spoke that. He went out and put that in the atmosphere, and the Lord said, yep, that's what we're going to do. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Listeners, thank you for joining in with us as well. Thank you for being here with us at Daily Spark. My name is Dr. Angela Chester, where I want to inspire you, encourage you, empower you, and enlighten you. And just a quick reminder, continue to shine your light. Until next time, my friends, have a great week. Bye-bye.